The moment this scandal exploded, it wasn't just another royal headline, it was a full-blown power clash that sent shockwaves through the monarchy, exposing a chilling game of leverage, pressure, and a threat so bold it forced the palace into immediate war mode. London woke up to whispers that quickly turned into a roar. Behind the polished gates of Buckingham Palace, something dangerous had unfolded. And at the center of it all stood Meghan Markle, not as a distant outsider anymore, but as a woman allegedly making a calculated move to force her way back into royal power. But this wasn't diplomacy. This wasn't negotiation. This was pressure. And the target? Not a senior royal, not a political figure, but a young woman who had never asked for the spotlight, Lady Louise Windsor. According to explosive insider accounts, Meghan allegedly issued what many are calling a chilling ultimatum: restore privileges, reinstate status, or face consequences that would ripple across the monarchy. And those consequences? They weren't vague. They were terrifyingly specific, an alleged threat to release damaging material tied to Louise and her private life. Suddenly, this wasn't just royal drama. This was personal, and the palace knew it. Within hours, panic didn't just spread, it crystallized into action. Because while Meghan may have believed she held leverage, she underestimated one key figure, Princess Anne. Anne doesn't play games. She doesn't hesitate, and she certainly doesn't tolerate threats. The moment the situation reached her, insiders say she moved with ice-cold precision. Emergency meetings, legal teams mobilized, intelligence units activated. No leaks, no hesitation, just action. Because this wasn't about optics anymore. This was about protecting one of their own. And as Louise reportedly retreated into complete silence, canceling appearances, vanishing from public view, and shutting down her digital presence, the emotional impact became impossible to ignore. A young royal, known for her quiet dignity, suddenly caught in the middle of something she never chose. And that's when the real shift happened. Because Anne wasn't alone. Behind the scenes, a powerful alliance quietly formed. Catherine, Princess of Wales, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, and Anne herself. 3 women, one united front, not emotional, not reactive, strategic, calculated, and completely unshakable. While Meghan's alleged plan leaned on public narrative and media pressure, the palace responded with something far more dangerous: control, legal control, narrative control, institutional control. And then came the detail that turned everything from scandal into something far darker: the footage. Insiders revealed that the alleged material Meghan threatened to release wasn't just controversial, it was suspected to be manipulated. A deepfake, a fabricated narrative designed not necessarily to prove anything, but to create doubt. And that's where the real danger lies, because doubt spreads faster than truth. And once planted, it doesn't need proof to destroy a reputation. But here's where Meghan's strategy may have collapsed under its own weight, because instead of fear, the palace responded with exposure. Forensic teams were immediately deployed, digital analysts dissected the footage, legal advisors prepared cross-jurisdiction action, and Anne made one thing crystal clear behind closed doors: if this crossed the line into defamation, it would trigger consequences on a global scale. No quiet settlements, no backdoor negotiations, full force. Meanwhile, as the situation escalated, Prince William reportedly stepped in, not publicly, but decisively. His focus wasn't headlines, it was protection, ensuring Louise, Sophie, and every vulnerable member of the family were shielded from what insiders described as a targeted narrative attack. And then came the moment that shifted everything from tension to confrontation. Because this wasn't just about Meghan anymore. This reached the very top. King Charles III was briefed, and according to sources, his reaction was immediate and unmistakable. This wasn't a family dispute. This was institutional sabotage. And with that, a powerful internal protocol was activated, one rarely used, designed specifically for reputational warfare. Everything changed. Suddenly, the palace wasn't reacting. It was counterattacking. Legal warnings were drafted. Digital tracking systems activated. Media monitoring intensified. Every potential release, every leak, every whisper, scrutinized, traced, and prepared for response. Because Meghan had crossed into territory where the monarchy doesn't negotiate, it defends. And while Meghan's side reportedly scrambled to maintain a calm public image, highlighting themes of resilience, motherhood, and personal truth, behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. Deals collapsing, projects paused, allies stepping back, because risk had entered the equation. And in the world of power, risk is everything. What started as a supposed strategy to regain influence was rapidly turning into something else entirely, a confrontation Meghan may not have fully anticipated, because she wasn't facing individuals anymore, she was facing the system. And that system had just drawn a line that said this far and no further. But here's the twist that makes this story even more explosive. Despite the warnings, despite the legal threats, despite the united front against her, Meghan didn't back down. Not yet, because something was pushing her forward. Something bigger than pride, bigger than reputation. Something that insiders say may explain why she risked everything, even triggering a royal crisis that could permanently close every door back into the monarchy. And what that something is, changes everything. The truth no one was ready to admit was that this wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a collision of desperation, pressure, and a ticking clock that was closing in on Meghan Markle faster than anyone outside her inner circle realized. Because behind the polished interviews, behind the carefully curated smiles, behind the language of truth and healing, there was something far more urgent unfolding. Contracts, deadlines, and consequences. Insiders revealed that Meghan wasn't just speaking out for narrative control, she was racing against financial and reputational collapse. A high-stakes production deal tied to her podcast demanded delivery, not just content, but impact. And not just impact, but controversy. If she failed to deliver something explosive, something attention-grabbing, something that would dominate headlines, there were penalties. Millions on the line, partnerships at risk, a brand already slipping, pushed to the edge. So suddenly, everything started to make sense. The timing, the pressure, the escalation, and the alleged threat that shook the palace. Because if Meghan didn't create a moment, she would pay for it. But what she may not have calculated was the speed and precision of the royal response. Because while she was preparing to release her narrative, the palace had already begun dismantling it piece by piece, layer by layer, before it could even take hold. This wasn't reaction. This was an interception. Digital analysts tracked the spread of leaked clips before they could go viral. Media allies were quietly briefed. Legal warnings were sent across platforms. Even corporate partners began pulling back, sensing the storm that was about to explode. And then came the moment that changed everything. The podcast dropped. Titled with calculated boldness, positioned as a truth-telling revelation, it carried all the elements Meghan needed. Emotion, implication, and just enough ambiguity to avoid direct legal claims. But the message? Unmistakable. Veiled references, strategic language, and a narrative that pointed, without naming, straight toward Lady Louise Windsor. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Listeners didn't just question the content, they rejected it. Social media erupted. Accusations flooded in. Words like manipulation, exploitation, and targeted smear began trending within hours because people saw through it. And that's when the palace made its most powerful move yet. Not through leaks, not through anonymous sources, but through direct, visible, undeniable presence. In a moment that stunned even seasoned royal watchers, Princess Anne and Catherine, Princess of Wales, appeared together, side by side. No theatrics, no shouting, just authority. Anne's message cut like steel, clear, controlled, and devastatingly precise. When the integrity of a young woman is weaponized for someone else's gain, silence is no longer an option. And Catherine followed, not with anger, but with unwavering calm, reinforcing one simple truth. Louise was not a story. She was not a symbol. She was not a target. She was family. And in that moment, everything shifted because this was no longer Meghan versus the monarchy. This was the monarchy standing together, publicly, unapologetically, and with absolute unity. Then came the final blow, the evidence. A forensic report, cold, technical, undeniable, confirmed what many had suspected. The alleged footage tied to Louise's circle, almost entirely fabricated. A deepfake, engineered, manipulated down to the metadata, not rumor, not speculation. Proof. And once that proof hit the surface, the entire narrative Meghan had been building began to collapse. Fast. Streaming platforms moved to contain the damage. Edits were forced. Disclaimers added. Quiet retractions slipped into official statements. Sponsors stepped back even further, unwilling to be tied to something now labeled as potentially defamatory. And behind the scenes, panic, because what was meant to restore control had triggered the exact opposite: isolation, legal exposure, and a reputation now hanging by a thread. But while Meghan's world tightened, something remarkable was happening on the other side. Lady Louise Windsor stepped forward, not with anger, not with retaliation, but with something far more powerful: composure. In her first public appearance after the storm, she didn't address the accusations directly. She didn't defend herself. She didn't engage. Instead, she redefined the narrative with quiet strength, with dignity, with a message that cut deeper than any response ever could. Your identity is not shaped by what others try to project onto you, but by what you choose to stand for when they do. And just like that, the story flipped. She was no longer the target. She was the symbol of resilience, of restraint, of a new generation that refuses to be pulled into chaos. And the palace made sure that transformation wasn't temporary. Plans were already in motion. Increased visibility, new responsibilities, a future being carefully shaped, not around scandal, but around purpose. Because this wasn't just about defending Louise, it was about redefining her role. Meanwhile, King Charles III closed the chapter in the only way the monarchy knows how, not with noise, but with permanence. Protocols were strengthened, legal frameworks reinforced, and a clear message sent not just to Meghan, but to anyone watching. The monarchy may remain silent, but it is never powerless. And when pushed to the edge, it doesn't crumble. It responds decisively, strategically, and without hesitation. As for Meghan, she now stands at a crossroads, a path where every move is watched, every word analyzed, every action weighed against the storm she just unleashed. Because what was meant to be a comeback became a confrontation. What was meant to restore influence exposed vulnerability. And what was meant to shake the monarchy ultimately revealed its strength. But here's the part that keeps insiders whispering behind closed doors. This wasn't the end. It was just the first round. Because in a battle where narratives are weapons, reputations are currency, and silence is strategy, no one walks away unchanged. And the next move could be even more explosive than the last.